Well, hello, bootstrappers.
Hello, bootstrappers.
And today we have a good friend of mine. We've worked together for many, many years, Menke from GrowthX. We have worked on, I don't know how many startups. He's worked on countless more, and just fantastic. And today we're going to talk about the ideal customer profile and what that means to a startup and why it's so important. I mean, it gets back to, we covered the book around This is Marketing from Seth Godin, and he's saying the same thing, which is find that customer to focus on in the beginning.
That's right. I mean, as we talk about at GrowthX, having an ideal customer profile is the single most important asset. I mean, your ideal customer profile impacts absolutely everything else that you do, whether you're trying to find product market fit or you're trying to scale. I mean, it impacts your customer acquisition strategy, the channels, the amount of money you want to put into that customer acquisition cost. And unfortunately, a lot of the time what we run into when looking at deals or we're looking at founders that are asking for help is that their ideal customer profile really isn't clear. And they think that the market is going to tell them who their ideal customer profile is, which, as you and I know from doing this for a long time, the market doesn't really tell you. Like, I'm really excited to dive in, because this is, I said, this is the most important tool, most important piece of information for any entrepreneur to have. So rather than the first step of creating an ICP from like who has the biggest need and who's going to give me the most dollar amount, what you should really be looking at is yourself. Your own resources, your own market development budget, as we say, because you only have, as an entrepreneur, so much time. I mean, you've seen it, hundreds of times. Every entrepreneur has 3 jobs, especially in the Valley: product, market, and fundraising. Each of those is a full-time job. So the system, the environment, the ecosystem is already telling you to just get focused. All too often, entrepreneurs take ICP to mean ideal company profile, which If you're selling technology, guess what? Companies don't buy anything. People still do. You can call this analog growth hacking or whatever you want, but whether it's B2C, B2B, you're humans selling to other humans, even if it's touchless. Customers have needs. Customers have problems. If I'm trying to sell to Coca-Cola, it's really difficult for me to understand what Coca-Cola's needs are. Now, if I'm selling to the head of new product R&D for the beverage unit, well, now I can get specific. I can go, okay, well, what are her KPIs? What matters to her? What's the size of her team? What are the trends in the market that are going to impact her worldview? Now I can get specific, and that means I can get tactical. And again, that's what's going to impact my messaging, my channel, my pricing structure. But if I'm thinking about everything from a company or worse, an industry standpoint, then it's impossible for me to ask the right questions in order to figure out if there's product market fit. And if I don't know what questions to ask, then I'm leaving that work up to the customer. And believe me, I've seen it enough times. The customer does not know if there's product market fit. You can feature dump all you want, and they're not going to know what to do with it.
Well, they're probably doing about 3 jobs themselves too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and you said something there, which I think is really key, which is it's not IBM's ideal customer profile. It's not company X's customer profile. It's you for where you're at in your startup with your tactical situation. That ideal customer profile.
I've been on this soapbox for probably 2-3 years now, where I think scale is a terrible word. I think it forces a lot of entrepreneurs to tie their hands behind their backs and to do things that limit and hurt their own self-interest. And I think what people need to keep in mind is that there are 2 phases for any entrepreneur to get through. The first is what we call market development. And market development is a phase where you're finding product market fit and finding revenue for the purpose of learning. And you're intentionally getting yourself in the weeds. You're getting intimate with how revenue is generated. And it's not going to be scalable because your goal is to learn. That's where you're going to get your master's degree in your own business. It's not turnkey. And hopefully you can learn in a way where once you find product market fit, you've built a structure that easily pivots to scale. But you shouldn't be worrying about that, because learning doesn't need to be scalable. Revenue needs to be scalable. Well, you don't even have the resources to make learning scalable right now.
It's interesting because raising money from the wrong people or prematurely creates a lot of this behavior because you have to promise, oh man, we figured it out. We have it figured out. That's why you should give me money right now. And then I'm going to take that money, I'm going to scale really fast. And you don't know how to do that. Even if you could do it, the wheels come off and you end up a smoking dumpster fire on the side of 101 in Silicon Valley. It happens a lot.
Well, so it happens a lot, before that round is raised and after, right? It's all putting lipstick on a pig, which is why, the revenue, why more and more accelerators, why more and more venture capital firms are really taking the GrowthX model, which is being focused on revenue generation first, because VCs have wisened up to the fact that finding product market fit is not a problem that more capital can solve.
No,
it's not. Time. So you need to solve for that first, and solving for that doesn't need to be scalable. So why are we going to build something why are we going to tie that hand behind our back when we can be building referential customers? We can be pulling from our network. We can get to break even and actually find out what is that predictable sales model look like? What's that path look like? Even if, another way we talk about it at GrowthX is you shouldn't be solving for the top of the funnel first. Solving for the top of the funnel actually is a problem that money can solve. You should solve for the bottom of the funnel first. And you solve for the bottom of the funnel first. Now okay, great. So if I get in front of the right person, I know I've got a 50-50 chance of closing them. So now I got to do is scale the number of right people that I get in front of. And that's why the ICP is so important. Because if you get in front of a bunch of different types of people, you don't really know what you're testing. And frankly, most people aren't testing anything, right? So you have to make sure you're actually being targeted towards experiment. That's why we talk about at GrowthX, stop improvising and start going to market with intent. With every action, including creating an ideal customer profile and then pricing and strategies and all that moving forward, you have to do it with intent, not just, chasing after shiny objects, whatever is the new idea that somebody had, over Phil's that morning.
So Max, let's say, okay, I buy in, I'm all in, like the ICP is really, really important. What do I do next? How do I figure out what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so as you get into that, as you start creating your ICP, you kind of need to know what your market development budget is to start off with. And you need to have an idea of realistically what level of effort you can put towards any ideal customer profile. So for example, let's take a look at runway. Now, if you only have 6 months of runway, sure, and you don't take that into account before you start coming up with your ICP, here's what you run the risk of doing. Well, enterprise technology companies are really exciting and they're big dollar value, so I want to go after sell them. Well, what you're going to learn really quickly is that you're going to run out of runway because it takes 6 months to sell your product to an enterprise company. So my first piece of advice before anyone ever starts talking about ICPs is look at your own business, look at your own company, and make sure you understand the level of effort and level of intention you have to put into this thing. The second thing that you should do.
I'll tell you this, selling to an enterprise customer is 6 months is fast if they're on fire. If they're on fire and you have a bucket of water, 6 months is fast.
But it's never considered, right? Oftentimes, all these pieces, pricing, ICP, messaging, they're all siloed when they shouldn't be. They're all actually holistic. And if you change one piece, it changes all the other ones. So that's why we start off by saying, before you ever take a look at your ICP, the second thing you should do before you take a look at your ICP is everyone talks about running a data-driven business, but very few do. Most people are sitting on data, even if it's anecdotal data, even if it's dumb data, they're sitting on. So the first thing we do at GrowthX is we go, all right, let's take every conversation you've had. Presumably you've talked to people out in your market. So maybe you don't exactly have product market fit, or even look at GrowthX, our latest investment doesn't exactly have product market fit, but they're doing a couple $1 million in revenue every year. So you go through your existing clients, you go through your existing pipeline, there's a pattern there. I've never done that exercise with an entrepreneur where our worldview hasn't completely changed afterwards.
Right, because all customers aren't the same. It's not like they're all 50 widgets that acted the same and paid the same and bought the same way. There's different.
Well, and the funny thing is, and I'm guilty of it, and we've been guilty of it at GrowthX all the time. More often than not, as an entrepreneur, you're moving 1,000 miles per hour. You never stop to just look around and go, so where did we come from? You never stop to take that pause and understand what you learned so far before you even start getting into an ideal customer profile. Mine the heck out of the data that you're already sitting on and look for the patterns. Do a current account mapping, do a current account review, and go, where was I getting the most amount of revenue, or at least the most excitement? And that you should see patterns of people who just go, I'm interested, and other people who said, boy, I was really excited about this, and then for whatever reason, you didn't follow up, or the conversation just went dry, and you really probably have a pretty solid lead sitting in your pipeline. So if you don't get any clear signals from that, well, first of all, what are you looking for to do a customer profile? Again, we're looking for people. We're not looking for companies. We're not looking for industries. So what we have to keep in mind is that there are 4 reasons why any business buys. Keep in mind that there are 4 reasons why any business buys: make money, save money, competitive advantage, or avoid risk compliance.
And it's interesting, Eva found her first ICP in that last one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a big one. If you find that one, I mean, basically what you're talking about is if somebody does something against the law or against regulations, a lot of heads start to roll. There are big problems with that. So
especially if there's like the company has compliance requirements, but the individual is carrying like their own risk.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. And that especially in the B2C side. So the icon that's missing here is for B2C, people buy emotionally. I mean, your iPhone's a great example. I've had Nokia phones, I've had Motorola phones. Guess what? They all have cameras. They all do text and email and all that fun stuff. But all my friends text in blue. So that's why I buy an iPhone, right?
Yep.
That's not a smart economic decision. It's an emotional one. But businesses, make no mistake, buy because of one of these 4 reasons. And the reason why you're trying to create an ICP so that you can evaluate who is the most likely to buy with the least amount of effort. So you're going to come up with multiple different ICPs, and you're going to run them through the same process, and you're going to evaluate inside the building, as we like to say, which ones have the most logical, practical case for having a good business pain or business use case for your business. And if you want to know, well, how do I know who has these reasons to buy? You take these 4 pain points and you flip it on its head. So if a company wants to make money, then they're probably doing something where they're not making enough of it. If a company wants to save money, then it means that their problem is they're probably leaking efficiency. They're doing something that should be automated. If they want to keep or gain a competitive advantage, that means they're probably on top of the market. They're probably already doing a good job. And similarly, David, as you found out, somebody's probably at a risk of falling out of compliance. So you're looking, as you're evaluating companies, as you're evaluating industries, what you have to be prepared to get into is any individual's workflow. What's the job that they're doing? How are they doing that job? And when you evaluate how they're doing that job, that's how you find the pain points. But you're also going to find the weight of those reasons. What's the priority of those reasons? How heavy is that for you? And you're never going to find it unless you start getting into other people's workflows. I mean, unfortunately, selling is looked at as a very negative activity. But newsflash, as an entrepreneur, you're a salesperson. And if you don't buy into that, you're going to have a tough ass time being an entrepreneur.
Tricking people into it, right? And you're not being a trickster. You're actually trying to make their life better and serve them.
Right. And the only way you can do that is you have to have business acumen, you have to have empathy, and you have to have curiosity. And so you have to, if selling is helping, if you believe that you can help people, well, then the only way you can help people is by understanding what's going wrong. you can't just go to the market and ask them to tell you what their problems are. I mean, you can, it'll just take a lot of time. You'll get a bunch of odd feedback. It'll be odds and ends all over the place. It's much faster. It's much more capital efficient for you just to spend a little bit of time wondering how an individual in a particular role does their job. And again, this is where if you stop at the company level, it's really difficult to understand what 4 reasons a person would buy. But if you go to a title, right, it's like, okay, well, why would Netflix buy versus the head of growth marketing at Netflix? Well, okay, now I can understand what that person's job is, so it's easy to understand how they do their job.
It's like, why do they get fired? That person, what's going to get them fired and what's going to get them a promotion?
Yeah, or one of my favorite hacks for finding an ICP, finding out what's valuable to them, and this works all the time. I like to actually use this as my very last step, as my last sanity check to make sure that my ICP actually has teeth before I start building any infrastructure around it, is I go out and I build an ICP and then I just Google top trends or top priorities for, and then I put in the title of my ICP. So like heads of growth marketing in construction software or whatever it might be, right? And then I'll put maybe the year in there. And what you should see on the first 2 pages of Google is a bunch of blog posts that tell you exactly that. It's like top 10 things concierge doctors practices need to think about in 2020 or 2021. And if you are on point, you should see the reasons that you laid out in your hypotheses for a company to buy in your top 3 and your top 5 consistently in every blog post. And if you don't, then you probably don't have a good use case. It's probably not the right ICP, and you should keep, searching around.
There's nothing sadder than an entrepreneur that solves a problem nobody has.
Well, unfortunately, that's how a lot of products get developed, right? It's a product born without a problem to solve, and then you're looking for a market, which is even more difficult. Now, hopefully, most entrepreneurs created a product with a specific market, with a specific audience in mind, and all you're really starting for is what's my beachhead? Where do I start?
Right.
Because for again, thinking about market development versus sales and marketing, in order for you to do sales and marketing, what do you really need? You need brand logos, you need case studies, you need metrics, you need quotes and referrals and all that other stuff. And well, where's that going to come from?
And that's a pretty good point, because what I feel like a lot of people do is they solve for the I'm starting out and I want to be big, instead of what's the next beachhead, what's the next milestone. I only need 10 customers. I only need 100 customers and I'll break even. Or I only need 50 more customers and I can do that round.
Yeah, and so look, those milestones are great. Just break it down even further, because the more you break it down, I mean, Will, in our own portfolio, I'll tell you a very well-kept secret. The companies that perform the best are the ones that have a milestone on their wall every month. No question, you can set your watch by it. The companies that say, what's the amount of business that I have to do this month? That's realistic. It's a stretch, but it's realistic. Those companies just start doing revenue. They do that target. It's not that you don't acquire revenue for the purpose of raising a round. What does that mean?
I mean, at One and Only, and Eva can tell you this, we would sit down on Monday and say what was going to happen by Friday. Period.
Yeah.
We didn't think any further than that. Screw next year. It doesn't matter. It's Monday, Friday. What are we going to deliver?
Yeah, and that takes you directly back to, you can only do that exercise and do it well if you have an ICP. So to yes. Take that a bit further, how we get started with an ICP is we have this funnel, because everything in GrowthX is a funnel, as you know.
Absolutely.
And it starts with picking an industry. And I can't stress it enough. You need to pick one industry. And within an industry, you then start looking at ideal companies. And this is a place where a lot of entrepreneurs stop. Remember, they think it's ideal company profile. But even within an industry, there are obviously different types of actors. I mean, let's just say, for example, I was selling a new blazing fast Wi-Fi solution for airplanes, right? And God forbid people could start zooming on airplanes. But if I was selling the solution and I was going through this exercise, if I didn't think about, first of all, how do I cull the number of companies down? Well, then I'm going to go sell to Delta and I'm going to go sell to Spirit Airlines. But here's what's going to happen. Delta actually invests in customer experience. That's a mindset. Delta doesn't get awards for being good and in-cabin experience by accident. They get there by spending money, and that's the only thing that I care about. I want to find companies that have budget, whereas Spirit Airlines currently doesn't even have Wi-Fi on their airplanes. So why would I target them just because they're an airline? Why would I target them as one of my ideal companies? Yeah, they don't value in-cabin experience, so we don't share the same mindset. So I have to convince them that there's a problem? No, thank you. I want the most amount of revenue for the least amount of effort. So you're looking at ideal companies, and then from there, you start identifying the departments. Ideally, where's the money going to come from? Where's the budget going to come from? So is it going to be, retail? Is it going to be e-commerce? Is it going to be HR? Is it going to be sales? And if it's multiple departments, figure out the one with the biggest need. From there, once you understand the department, then you can understand exactly who within that department is the economic buyer. Almost always it's the head of that department, but that's really the only person you care about. You're going to have technical buyers and user buyers, but all of your information as far as your ICP, your messaging, it should always be focused on your economic buyer. And then once you know who your economic buyer is, now you have an individual and you have a profile, and you can start to sit in that person's shoes. You can go, I wonder how they do their job. And if you can't think about how they do their job, I have another hack for you. Go onto LinkedIn, read their LinkedIn profiles, or better yet, look at job posts. And I'll tell you exactly how these people are measured and the jobs they're responsible for. And you should be able to tie a direct line between your product, service, technology, whatever it is, and those responsibilities. And if you can't, then you're not going to be able to solve any business issues, because that's what you're looking for. Is if you have that individual, okay, what are the issues with their business? Are they not making enough money? Are they leaking efficiency? Are they falling out of compliance? And if you have an ICP, you should be able to say, I help this title and role at these types of companies make money, save money, stay in compliance, or keep a competitive advantage by using this product or service. And if you can say that with a straight face, now you have an ICP to test.
So I like it. I mean, of course, we've done this together, in the past. Where do you think people get hung up on this process? It's just stopping too far up the funnel, basically, was what I'm hearing, and not tying it to an actual person's needs.
It is in every situation, whether I'm working with an accelerator or it's the first go, one-on-one with the founder, it's not going deep enough. It's not really understanding the keystrokes of another person's job. All of us are sitting here in front of 13-inch boxes with a bunch of alphanumeric, buttons in front of us, and we're all just doing stuff on those. We don't know how other people do their jobs. So it's hard for us to communicate, and therefore it's hard for us to even understand what value we create for them. And if we can't communicate that, then how are we even testing whether or not we have product market fit? I mean, I see this all the time with companies in our own portfolio when we get started. We actually have a ton of success turning companies that originally said no to founders into our first customers just because the fit was there. We just didn't know how to communicate it.
Right.
Because we didn't really know how people do their jobs. So the biggest problem that I see people have is that they don't focus it all the way down to the specific business use case. The other problem that I see people have is, they still blend multiple industries in there. And look, it's great to have multiple ICPs, but you need to put one foot forward. So my recommendation for this exercise is, it doesn't hurt to brainstorm multiple ICPs, come up with multiple ICPs, but take every single ICP through the same process. And by taking every single one through the same process, you're going to see different levels of intensity, different levels of stickiness in there. And that's what's going to tell you right at the bat, at least, what is worth your market development budget and what's not worth your market development budget. And again, you're doing all this inside the building. You can do this in a week, which is way more efficient learning than the month of trying to find conversations with 15 different people across 10 different, ICPs. That's where you're going to get information all across the board.
So Eva, does this resonate with your experiences?
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about this. Would you put the funnel back up,
Yeah.
Max? Because there's a couple of places that we, first of all, we really stumbled on this when we first started. It was just hard. I think we just leaked a lot of effort. We leaked a lot of money until we started to focus in. Which department is buying was really, really critical. Because we did vulnerability scanning, which can fit inside of the compliance side, or it can fit inside the IT side, depending on how a company is structured. But each of those, they think very, very, very differently. They think radically different. They have different goals. And that became really important. And it was cleaner when it was a single side buying, and when it was a blended buy, it became a lot stickier. So the more we could have a really crystal clear buyer, the better. And then the economic buyer changed depending on the size of the company we were approaching. So you go to a larger enterprise, company selling into, the CTO didn't give a shit. Mm-hmm. But you could go down 2 steps and they cared very, very, very deeply. And they were the economic buyer for that product. You go to a smaller company and sometimes it was a CTO, but radically different. And, knowing who to talk to in what type of company is really important.
Well, so that's a great example of how pipeline diversity, having multiple different types of deals can actually go wrong. So what you need to look at, again, it goes back to your development budget. The first question you should actually be looking at is, okay, if everything went well, what's the maximum number of customers I could handle? And for most companies, it's somewhere between 2 to 10. So if you only had 2 to 10 companies, if you only had 2 to 10 customers, well, then you don't need all that big of a funnel. Now think about how targeted, how much more effective you could be at selling if you were only talking to a really narrow audience, if you could be hyper personalized, right? So you're not selling to the CTO who's like, well, this is a problem, but I don't really fit. But where you're talking to the SMBs, this is, my hair's on fire, I need to solve for. So I always use the example of, as in ICPs, if I have founder A and founder B, and founder A goes out in a week and has 10 meetings with 10 different people, that guy doesn't know anything about anybody's business. But if founder B goes out and they have 10 meetings with 10 people who are all in the same space, well, halfway through the week, founder B is now a consultant. He now can say, well, as I'm speaking with other people similar to you, what I'm actually seeing is this. So based on what the competition's doing, this is what you should consider. How much more effective is founder B now? So again, let's not forget the name of the game for the ICP is to get the most amount of revenue for the least amount of effort. It doesn't need to be particularly scalable. By the way, you can't scale yourself anyway.
Right.
So what you're trying to do in all of this is you're trying to game the system in your favor, just so that you're as soon as you do go outside the building, as soon as you do go start selling, you're going to be as effective as you can possibly be. So having as targeted of a market as possible, that's what enables you to learn really quickly.
So Max, not everyone can be a GrowthX portfolio company. What are the resources you would recommend for people that are early stage, just starting to go through this process? What would you say they should go look at to get better at this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for starters, at GrowthX, we actually put our entire program online specifically for this reason. Okay. As a way for us, we were, as Andrew likes to put it, we were a carbon-based business. The only way to get access to this information was basically to work with us, and to have Will, you and I invest in the business. But frankly, we want to be as helpful as we can to the founder, to the entrepreneur community worldwide. And so what we did is we took all this content, we took all the work that we've done and case studies from the portfolio that you and I have invested in over the years, and we've applied that to our system and our methodology. We put the whole thing online in what we call MXP Online. So it's available for entrepreneurs, and it's not an academic exercise. I'll tell you that much. I mean, there isn't a certification. There isn't a final exam. Your certification is traction, it's results, it's progress.
Surviving.
And while you can find plenty of blog posts, and while you can go to plenty of, you can go to the SaaSters and stuff of the world and hear, war stories about how people, took a company from 0 to 100 million ARR. What's really lacking is the how-to, and that's why I love what you guys are doing, is actually showing people how do you do this work. Because there's plenty of hacks, there's plenty of email templates, but the problem with a lot of advice out there is it lacks the advice of how people were successful before, lacks the context of what was going on in their business. And so it ends up creating a bunch of failed experiments for people who try to hop on board, piggyback off of the success. So, I'd absolutely take a look at MXP Online. It's got everything that we've ever done with every entrepreneur in our portfolio, and then some.
We'll put a link to that in the resources for the program. And the thing I would say is that, I've had friends that would tell me, Will, why do you read so much? Why do you listen to so many things? Why do you, can't you just learn that through experience? And I'm like, if someone's had a massive ass beating, and they took the time to write down what happened, how it happened, and what they can do, and I can avoid that beating, it's the cheapest thing I can do in life. So this program probably represents, I don't know how many beatings that you can avoid by reading through it and just kind of learning from what other people have done. And don't wander the forest for 3 years before you figure this stuff out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't have to innovate finding product market fit. It is the least capital efficient way to go to market. We talk about this with corporations at GrowthX Corporate. You want to innovate on products, but you don't want to innovate on commercialization. There is a path. And the thing that I think frustrates a lot of entrepreneurs is that path has to be focused. It has to be deliberate. Otherwise, you're going to get to market in the slowest way possible, right? It's like that old military saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Right.
And that's the entire approach of the MXP. It's that if you spend a little bit of time being really thoughtful and diligent about and intentional about what you're doing, then you'll actually get to the place you want to go towards much faster. But in reality, what 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs do is there's no why. It's all improvised. There's no why behind each conversation, each email campaign, each landing page. You don't know what you're testing. You're putting up a landing page because you read a blog post that said you should put up a landing page.
It's desperation born by trying to raise money or trying to, it's like sprinting across a minefield. You're going to finish your journey a lot sooner than you think.
So you said something earlier, Max, about using an ICP, like to really go in and then develop a beachhead, and from there, to then extend. Would you talk a little bit more about that? Absolutely.
So, as founders within our portfolio are very sick of hearing me saying, early on, 1 becomes 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, which is a way of saying, look, we have to start somewhere. And if you start building a funnel, if you try to start acquiring customers, eventually you're going to get that first customer. And just by the process of getting the first one, you're probably going to create enough momentum to get the second one. And from those 2, you're going to start creating those case studies and start getting that data and start getting, at least you can turn to customers 3, 4, and 5 and say, well, somebody's working with us, right, which is a lot of credibility. That's actually something that it's a world of difference. Take it from me. I've been the first person to sell a lot of products, and it becomes an entirely different world once you can say other people that I'm working with experience these things. So your beachhead, and this is really sort of the final part of the ICP for a lot of our founders, is I always like to say, focus on the 50. There are not more than 50 individuals on planet Earth that if you really drill down are your right product market fit, are really fit within your ideal customer profile. And your beachhead isn't being all things to all people. And it also isn't the thing that you're going to be selling maybe when you're at Series A. What you're looking for is very simple. Where can I get the most amount of revenue for the least amount of effort? Where can I get my foot in the door and start learning? And I have the ability to not have to convince people in my worldview. They already see the world the way I see it, and I can just get my hook in there. Even if it's not everything that I do, if I can get my hook in there, then I can expand, or I can just start, engaging with them more, whatever that might be. As we like to say at GrowthX, your market milestone. You want to build your beachhead for that market milestone. Once you're into an organization, it's so much easier to grow the revenue within it. But you have to figure out, and I'll go back to what I was talking about earlier on. You may have that $6 billion, that $6 trillion TAM, but you have to start somewhere. And so your beachhead might be one very specific silo of an ICP, but you realize, well, if I'm successful, if I get 10, 20, 30 customers within there, then the beachhead right next to it isn't that hard to pivot into. And then if you do that one, it's pretty easy to pivot into the next one. But if I try and attack all of them at the same time, I'm going to get different market feedback. I'm going to get different product feedback, and I'm not going to own any particular use case. And that's the name of the game. Both with an ICP and with product development, there has to be a use case that you can own.
Awesome. Any more questions, Eva, before we wrap it up?
No, but I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to sound like a disciple right now. Here's what I've got out of this. The name of the game, especially if you're starting out bootstrapping, is to get the most amount of revenue with the least amount of effort. And the value of getting a ICP or ideal customer profile is that defines the person who is most likely to buy with the least amount of effort. Did I get it?
Yeah, basically. I mean, you only want to be going after people who share your worldview, because selling is hard as it is. If you could make it easier for yourself, if you could have good conversations, more good conversations, wouldn't you do that? Great. Then you should pre-qualify every conversation you have and put the odds in your favor by having a clear and focused ideal customer profile. Because I'll tell you, if you can find those 50 individuals on planet Earth who are predispositioned to sharing your worldview, they have budget, they're spending money already on solutions like yours, you're going to learn, you're going to get to market a heck of a lot faster than if you took a spray and pray approach and you hope that somebody came to you and said, thank God, where have you been? We've needed you. I've almost never, I don't know you, I've almost never seen that actually happen. Yeah.
That would. But so to said another way, like the limiting factor really is my time.
It is.
An entrepreneur. And so if I only get 10 shots a week, I want 10 shots with the highest likelihood of it going in the basket.
The layup.
Yeah. Or you want to get to know as quickly as possible. You want to get a definitive answer as quickly as possible. So all of this, create an ideal customer profile, it's a hypothesis. The worst thing that you can do is take a long time to find out if it's a good hypothesis or a bad hypothesis. And that's the reason why you want a super focused ideal customer profile, because you don't want to be diddle-daddling around.
So you're saying a yes is valuable and a no is valuable.
No is just as valuable.
But not knowing is horrible.
Well, not knowing is the worst place you can be.
I think that's why a lot of people do it the other way, is they're scared the answer is no. But no's okay, because you can get on with your life. Do it differently.
No is great, because guess what happens when I get to know? I'm that much smarter, and I already have another ICP lined up to go after. So you move forward, right? As long as you're keeping everything lean, as long as you're not putting all your eggs into one ICP basket, you're throwing a bunch of budget after it, and you're building videos and content, all this stuff before you validate it.
Yeah.
Because you really don't need anything to validate an ICP. You don't even need a website. You need an email address and a phone number, and you can talk to people to find out. And I said, you run that Google search. And you can find out if your ICP is a good ICP or if it's totally off the wall very quickly. And if you find that, then you start moving forward and you see if you can't turn that ICP from hypothesis into revenue. But the goal of all this, especially in market development, not sales and marketing, the goal of market development is to get to the truth faster. We want a yes, we want a no. And once we get to the truth that's a yes, then we hit that scale button. And scale is a problem that money can solve that you can raise investment dollars after.
Okay, so I will say this, like the whole over-investing thing is a really easy trap to fall into because you get a lot of excitement, you get a lot of momentum, but then it creates confirmation bias. And it's really hard to let go of a sunk cost sometimes.
Oh, and I mean, Will and I wouldn't have started GrowthX if that wasn't a common problem. I mean, the most common overinvestment, and this goes back to entrepreneurs, a lot of them, being fearful or not liking the societal expectations of sales, is outsourcing sales to a VP of sales, right? And what happens in that situation is you hire someone who's senior enough for the title, but too senior for the work. So in market development, you have to get intimate with the revenue. You have to manage every part of the pipeline. You have to be a part of the process. And so you hire someone for $150,000 to $200,000 a year, and you say, okay, well, where's the revenue? And they say, oh, well, I need a marketer in order to do that. You go, okay, fine, I'll get you a marketer. And then you say, all right, where's the revenue? And that person says, well, I need ad budget. And you go, all right, I'll start putting in ad budget. But you haven't even figured out, again, you need to solve for the bottom of the funnel first.
Well,
and that's when you outsource sales, and that's a problem that money can solve.
The worst is when they start saying, oh, if you would just add these 30 features, then they would buy. Even them went through that. It'll beat you to death.
Well, that's the beachhead, right? That's one of those limiting factors where you go, I have to focus only on the people who want to buy the product features that I have today that work today. But yeah, over investing your ICP. I mean, at GrowthX, we've taken on plenty of companies where we've only deployed and we've built successful pipelines in months with a very lo-fi deck, an email address, and an even lower fidelity website. And as long as it's just talking to somebody, as long as the economic buyer basically gets that website and goes, this is speaking directly to me. Everything else can pivot and it can change and it doesn't cost you nothing, right? So you shouldn't build anything until you actually start seeing some of that revenue come in. And then when you start building, you're building because what you're actually trying to do is make every step in that process from introduction to revenue more touchless.
Well, thanks, Max. I mean, I know it's iterating, but I've actually learned a lot hearing where you're at with this process. And I look forward to kind of maybe even digging into the materials and relearning some of this stuff and sharing with everyone the great process you guys have distilled after years and years of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we even are surprised ourselves what we learned just going through this with entrepreneurs and reviewing it every year. We're not the first to talk about ideal customer profiles by a long stretch, but I think what is important about ICPs and what's important about, at least our approach at GrowthX is everything in market development, everything in finding product market fit is holistic. You need to balance all of that. And the only way that you are even going to have the time to balance all of it is to be focused on a beachhead, focused on a specific market and having a specific goal in mind that you can achieve, because that goal will take you to your next one, And at each step of the way, the path will be clear. It won't be, just as ambiguous as get to Series A.
Well, thanks for being here, bootstrappers. We hope you enjoyed this. Put comments down there to tell us if you have follow-up questions or what you're thinking about or what you're struggling with.
That's right. We'd love to hear from you, and we all grow through the comments. So